He came out of the club ranks to assume the position as the next likely candidate for World Championship honors. Hello, I'm Bruce Flanders, and welcome to the best of American motorcycle racing on ESPN. Who is this future world champion, you ask? For road racing fans, the name is a familiar one. For those of you who are new to the sport, his name is Kevin Schwantz. 34 is his preferred number, but he has entertained fans worldwide wearing an array of different numbers and leathers while riding everything from superbikes to Grand Prix prototypes. Tonight we profile one of the young lions of road racing on this edition of ESPN's The Best of American Motorcycle Racing. Kevin Schwantz, making of a world champion. Daytona, 1986. The number 34 Suzuki belongs to Houston, Texas native Kevin Schwantz. This was the coming out party for the Yoshimura Suzuki rider. The former club rider was thrusted into the job of Yoshimura Suzuki team leader against the likes of Eddie Lawson, Wayne Rainey, and Fred Merkel. How did he do? Just fine, thank you. Riding like a veteran, the lanky Texan with curly blonde hair served notice that he would be a force to reckon with in the very near future. On this day in Daytona Beach, Schwantz finished a solid second to world champion Lawson and the factory Yamaha. He shared the winner's circle with Lawson and three-time U.S. Superbike champion Merkel. The early chapters of the Schwantz story were being written. The remainder of the 1986 season was a learning process for Schwantz and the Yoshimura Suzuki team. The previous year, Schwantz had had some outings with the team on a relatively sedate motorcycle without much success. 86 was his first real season, and the first season for the Suzuki GSXR 750 motorcycle, which would later become a potent force in the hands of the Texan. Throughout the 86 season, Schwantz and the GSXR proved fast, but unreliable. He played second fiddle to the Honda twins, Wayne Rainey, number 6, and Fred Merkel, number 1. The Honda riders rode the Honda Interceptor, which had thousands of miles of development. Rainey and Merkel were former Superbike champions and had a wealth of knowledge when it came to setting up, then riding the powerful four-stroke machines. Still, Schwantz was fast enough to stay with the Honda riders and learn what they were doing on the track. As the season progressed, Schwantz learned quickly and became faster than his Honda rivals. Add to that a season of development on the Suzuki GSXR motorcycle, and by season's end, Schwantz and the Suzuki were favorites to take the pole position and lead in the very early going. Victory, though, eluded Schwantz and company in 1986. In December of '86, Schwantz and the Yoshimura Suzuki team headed for Daytona for tire testing. Suzuki had seen enough of Schwantz to know that he was exactly what they were looking for: fast, aggressive, and with the desire to go all the way. He was like a minor league pitcher with a 110-mile-an-hour fastball. He was still raw, but everyone could see unlimited potential. The same could be said for the Suzuki motorcycle. The GSXR was like no machine before it. Out of the crate, it was a true race bike, without a doubt the best package available to consumers to date. If both Schwantz and the GSXR were to realize their potential in '87, well, there would be a lot of silverware in the trophy cases in Japan and in Texas. As Schwantz and Japanese teammate Satoshi Tsujimoto circulated the Daytona track, Schwantz was already thinking about next season. 1986 was very definitely a learning exercise, contesting the entire season as a full-fledged factory rider in the U.S. and sampling the European GP arena with a 3-race deal. Schwantz was thrown out head first into pavement racing's highest learning institutions.
The main thing I learned was to go out and do good in a championship series. You have to go out and finish consistent in all the races. It doesn't mean just winning one important race here or one important race there. It means that you have to go out and you have to put together 9 complete races and finish the best that you can in all 9 races, and hopefully win as many of them as you can to be able to do any good in a championship series. You know, if it were just one race, you could make or break it in one race. But with there being 9 races here in America for the Superbikes, you have to go out and finish consistent. You can't go out and get hurt. I fell down the 3rd race of the year and broke my collarbone and missed the next 3 races. So it was kind of a disappointing year for me and for Suzuki also, and hopefully next year will be a lot better.
Welcome back to the best of American motorcycle racing and our look at road racing star Kevin Schwantz. I'm Bruce Flanders, and we're in Daytona Beach, Florida for round 1 of the 1987 Superbike Championship, the famed Daytona 200. Schwantz and Japanese Formula One champ Satoshi Sugimoto arrived at the Florida track as pre-race favorites. Their December tire testing was very positive, and with the disappointment of the '86 season behind them, 1987 promised to be a successful one. During the week, it became obvious that Schwantz and Team Honda's Wayne Rainey were going to lock horns. And if they were to somehow falter, their backups, Honda's Bubba Schobert and Suzuki's Sugimoto, would be there to ensure victory. The pressure of the big race was evident in the faces and in the atmosphere surrounding the speedway. As far as Schwantz was concerned, his philosophy leading up to race day had been established in the early days of his career.
I think the main thing is to be able to go to the track on Thursday and start practicing. My main goal is to go there and to be as fast in practice as the other fast riders are, to not be a second or two behind the pace. That's the main way. I like, if come race day I'm within a tenth or 2/10 of a second of the guys who are going the fastest, I feel confident that I'll be there in the race, because I normally pick up anywhere from 3/4 of a second to a whole second in a race over just practicing, and sometimes even more than that. So the main thing I try not to do is psych myself out. I don't think about the race the night before. I try and go home, get a good night's rest, eat a good meal, and just basically get a good night's rest and be good and prepared for the race on Sunday.
As the 200-miler unfolded, the anticipated Schwantz-Rainey battle materialized to the delight of the fans on hand. But unlike the previous year, Rainey and the Honda were no longer the superior combination. Lap after lap in methodical fashion, Schwantz and the number 34 Suzuki began to inch further and further from Rainey and the Honda. It was a foregone conclusion at the 3/4 mark in the race that all Schwantz had to do was stay up on two wheels, and the prestigious victory would belong to the Texan, the Yoshimura crew, and the Suzuki GSXR. Unfortunately, fate intervened in a cruel way. Late in the race, a back marker fouled up Schwantz's entrance to the Daytona chicane, causing the Texan to go down and out of the Daytona 200. Here it is again in slow motion. You can't see the back marker, but his presence was enough to send Schwantz and his Suzuki into a wild slide. Schwantz was uninjured, except for a badly lacerated finger. Honda's Wayne Rainey raised his hand high in Daytona's victory circle at the end of the day. Schwantz's failure was his success. It was a hard lesson learned. Kevin Schwantz and Wayne Rainey met again on the track several weeks after Daytona, this time on foreign soil. The occasion? The 17th annual Transatlantic Match Races, a team event pitting North American riders against their British Commonwealth counterparts. In 1987, the series format called for 9 sprint races on 2 of England's premier road racing circuits. Forget about the team competition, though. Schwantz and Rainey electrified the British fans with fairing banging action in each of the 9 encounters. Schwantz had something to prove. He'd earned a reputation of being somewhat reckless. Daytona didn't help that image. Riding on the edge, Schwantz didn't fall in England. Battling with Rainey, he helped lead the American contingent over the Brits in the final team standings. Just staying upright was not an easy task for some of the other Americans. Number 53, Dan Chivington, went down several times during the 2-day affair. The second time with the help of a British compatriot. I'm sure that gesture was nothing compared to what he was screaming underneath his helmet. Canadian Gary Goodfellow also sampled the British tarmac as he took this wild ride. The British fans on hand were not too sympathetic, though, since Goodfellow rode for the North American squad. In the end, Rainey won 5 of the races, Schwantz 4. Let's look at some of the Schwantz-Rainey action in slow motion. In this sequence at the Brands Hatch circuit, the right knee of Schwantz actually serves as a battering ram as it smashes into Rainey's motorcycle. In this sequence, Schwantz tries the inside, but Rainey slams the door. More contact, neither rider goes down or is phased. And watch this recovery by Schwantz as he hangs off too much and snags his knee. That gives new meaning to the term riding all out. Back stateside, it was time to resume the 1987 U.S. Superbike Championship. Road Atlanta was the site for round 2. And like Daytona and the match races, it was number 6 Wayne Rainey on the Honda and Schwantz up front. Rainey's teammate Bubba Schobert, number 67, circulated in 3rd, biding his time. If either of the speedsters up front faltered in the least, he would have been more than glad to take over. Schobert was riding a smart race, especially when you consider the antics at the front of the pack. Case in point, watch this as Rainey passes Schwantz. The Suzuki rider gestures to Rainey. Your guess is as good as mine as to what was meant by all that. As the two hammered at each other in the 24-lap race, neither rider could gain any significant advantage over the other. The fans were treated to the two best superbike riders of the day, putting on a hell of a show. As in Daytona, the race would be decided by fate. Out of camera view, Schwantz made an impromptu off-road excursion. Rainey went on to take the win and a substantial lead in the standings. In two races, Schwantz had been in position to win, only to have victory snatched from under him late in the going. Laguna Seca Raceway in Monterey, California. At this point in the '87 season, Rainey had built up an insurmountable lead in the standings over Schwantz. But the Texan and the Yoshimura team were still in the hunt wherever they went. The scenario was the same at all the racetracks. Schwantz would prove to be the quickest rider on the track, but mental errors robbed the Suzuki rider of victory. At the prestigious Laguna Seca event, Schwantz again held the lead and was on his way to a sure win when fate yet again reared its ugly head. This time, it was Bubba Schobert who was the benefactor, as he took a popular win in front of his adopted home track fans. The transplanted Texan had recently moved to nearby Carmel Valley. Rainey, meanwhile, padded his points lead. At the season finale in Northern California, Schwantz and the Suzuki were unstoppable. Starting from the last row, due to a heat race infraction, Schwantz carved his way through the field in a handful of laps. At the snake-like Sears Point Raceway, that was a superhuman feat. The Texan had created a new mindset after the Laguna Seca disappointment. It was clear that Kevin Schwantz and the Suzuki GSXR motorcycle were the fastest combination on the U.S. superbike scene. Schwantz could not make up the deficit in the point standings incurred by his two early season DNFs. But when the final checkered flag fell at Sears Point, fans, competitors, and the media all had to acknowledge that Schwantz and the Suzuki were the currently best combination out there. Unfortunately for Schwantz and Yoshimura, 1988 would see the Texan in Europe full-time, except for one race, Daytona. Welcome back to the best of American motorcycle racing. I'm Bruce Flanders, and we're in the garage area at Daytona International Speedway, the year 1988. Kevin Schwantz was preparing for his first full season of Grand Prix racing, but had a point to make prior to his overseas departure. As you remember, Daytona 1987 had been a bitter disappointment for both Schwantz and Suzuki. On the way to victory, Schwantz crashed. With the memory of that day serving as a tremendous motivation factor, Schwantz went about the business of preparing for his only U.S. Superbike appearance of '88. Schwantz was hampered in practice and qualifying by a broken wrist, which swelled up and hindered his technique. Still, when it came down to qualifying, Schwantz put his Suzuki GSXR on the pole. Qualifying at Daytona is special to Schwantz. It was during qualifications for this big race in 1985 that the Texan realized he had a special gift.
Well, I guess the first big test was the first national here in 1985 at Daytona, when I came here on a GS 700 and wasn't even expected to qualify in the top 10, and managed to qualify third right in the middle of the front row. That was I think the first time I realized that I was going to be able to do good as a road racer, and that the stuff I'd done before wasn't just all luck.
By the time the green flag fell at the 1988 Daytona 200, most observers felt that it was a foregone conclusion that the number 34 Suzuki would end up in the winner's circle. However, the memories of the '87 Daytona event and Laguna Seca were still lurking in the back of everyone's mind. Those worries and the bad memories, however, were to be erased forever. Daytona 1988 turned out to be a grand day for Schwantz and Suzuki. No disappointments, no excuses, no problems. Schwantz devastated the competition. Suzuki put an exclamation point on the race, with Schwantz's Yoshimura teammate, Doug Poland, coming in a solid second place. The day and the moment, though, belonged to Schwantz. The then 23-year-old had redeemed himself and had given Suzuki their first ever victory in the prestigious Daytona 200. Determination, the key to Daytona '88, as far as Schwantz is concerned, his best asset.
I guess the other thing is just determination. I've always enjoyed riding motorcycles. I've always wanted to be the best at one certain thing, and I think that in a couple of years I should be able to become world champion if I don't have any big problems.
Those prophetic words would soon be put to the test. While Schwantz and company celebrated their Daytona victory, the Texan was already preparing himself mentally for round one of the 1988 World Championship, the all-important Japanese Grand Prix. This veritable sea of motorcycles belonged to Japanese road race fans attending round one of the World Championship, the Japanese Grand Prix. For Schwantz, Suzuki, and new sponsor Pepsi-Cola, the '88 season outlook was positive. The new Suzuki motorcycle was now on a par with the other Japanese racing hardware. At the start of the first GP of the year, Schwantz shot into the lead, followed by the world's best riders on the most technologically advanced two-wheeled machinery in existence. Schwantz had tested the new Suzuki at the Suzuka circuit several weeks prior to the race. What he found out in those test sessions came as good news to the Suzuki camp, bad news for the opposition. The Texan had shattered the lap record while testing, and when it came down to race day, everyone was shooting for the Texan and his number 34 Pepsi Suzuki. The only rider to hang on to Schwantz was the defending world champion, Wayne Gardner, on the number 1 Honda. The Australian actually got by the American rider and led for a while until this breathtaking pass. In slow motion, you can see Schwantz on the throttle all the way through the turn, never letting up, committing himself to the pass and executing it perfectly. Gardner had to be not only surprised, but impressed as well. Schwantz and the other current top American riders have elevated the GP riding technique a couple of notches, as Kenny Roberts demonstrated so decisively in his career. Schwantz and company have come to realize that sliding the motorcycle, as learned through American dirt tracking, is often the fast way around.
I think as fast as they go in Europe and in the World Championship stuff, you have to be able to go out and ride 35 laps, or however many laps the race consists of. You have to be able to go out and ride 35 laps, sliding the front tire, pushing the front tire, sliding the rear wheel the whole time. And I think that's where the dirt track comes in. Eddie Lawson and Kenny Roberts, everybody, Wayne Rainey, they've all ridden dirt track, and I think it's really helped a lot.
In the end, Schwantz, his sliding technique, and his Pepsi Suzuki crossed the Japanese GP finish line first. It was the Texan's first World Championship victory in his first GP as a full-fledged factory rider. As you can tell by his exuberance on the cool-off lap, Schwantz was happy, to say the least. As far as the Suzuki factory was concerned, he could have packed up and gone home. With the wins at Daytona and in the Japanese Grand Prix, Schwantz and Suzuki had scored the most important wins on the world racing schedule. Anything else would just be icing on the cake. The famed Nürburgring in Germany, along with Monza in Italy, and perhaps Brands Hatch in England, the Nürburgring is one of the most historically significant circuits in the world. Steeped in racing tradition, this track has been the site of many important moments in 2- and 4-wheel racing. The 1988 German Grand Prix would provide another memorable chapter in Nürburgring history. As the race unfolded under inclement skies, Schwantz and his Suzuki were on the move. The Texan was soon in the lead, riding away from the competition in the treacherous conditions. Schwantz has learned the circuits of Europe well. For an American coming over to contest the World Championship, learning a specific track while setting up a bike is vital. Schwantz has developed his own method of acclimating himself and his machine to a new facility.
I try and go out and try and learn all the, I guess, the really tough spots in the track. There's 2 or 3 corners in most tracks that take quite a while to learn over just the other simple, basic right and left turn corners. The main thing is just go out and practice the first couple sessions and just try and make your lines smooth around the track. And then the next 2 sessions, try and pick up the pace and try and get a good qualifying time in.
In front of the appreciative German crowd, front wheel up in the air, Schwantz powered to victory. The Schwantz-Suzuki combination were now threats to pull off the victory wherever they raced. For Team Pepsi Suzuki, 1988 was a surprisingly successful venture when you consider the fact that it was the first full year for their rider and for their Grand Prix motorcycle. It was a fantastic year. 1989 would be a tougher assignment. No longer would they be considered an outside, unproven entity. The opposition viewed them as a legitimate world title challenger. No longer could they count on the element of surprise. Everyone would begin 1989 with a clean slate. Honda, Yamaha, and Suzuki would be viewed as equals in the 1989 world title chase. the Suzuka Circuit in Japan, round one of the 1989 World Championship. The 22-lap race on the intimidating 3.64-mile Suzuka Circuit would go down as one of the most spectacular in recent history. Forget what specific teams or specific riders wanted to prove in the season opener. Everything and everybody had to take a back seat to a couple of riders at the top of their game. The 1989 Japanese Grand Prix will be remembered as the race in which Kevin Schwantz and the Suzuki battled Wayne Rainey and the Lucky Strike Yamaha. The perennial rivals electrified the close to 85,000 Japanese fans by racing fairing to fairing the entire race distance. Schwantz reflects on his strategy when it comes to close quarters racing.
As far as if I'm out there in a race and me and another guy are going head to head, I don't really use brake markers as much as most people do. However far he goes into a corner, I'd like to go in just a little further. And that's the way I ride most races, is wherever somebody gets on their brakes, I try and go in just as far, if not further, than they do, and try and get on the gas earlier, or if not earlier, at the same time as they do, just to either try and stay with them or get in front of them. And as long as you can keep a wheel in beside somebody, they're always worried about you being there, and there's a lot bigger chance of them making a mistake than you.
The action was so spectacular that words cannot do it justice. So sit back and enjoy two of the best Grand Prix riders going at it while listening to the beautiful sound of 500cc two-stroke V4s at full song. Kevin Schwantz went on from his second straight Japanese Grand Prix win to garner 4 more Grand Prix victories in 1989, with 1 more race still to be run. Although Schwantz won't be the 1989 world champion, he will have won more races than any other rider, no matter what happens in the season finale in Brazil. Place your bets. 1990 should be the year for Schwantz and Team Pepsi Suzuki. The last 2 seasons can be looked at as the making of a world champion. For the best of American motorcycle racing, I'm Bruce Flanders.